Naila, why is English language important to learn?
This is because English language is an international language and is widely followed and understood by people across the world.
I want to learn this language.
To learn every language, there are some skills to develop. Follow this class to learn these skills.
Viewers of MTA Africa and our cherished students on the program, A Simplified Guide to English Language, we welcome you once again to the program on MTA Africa. This is going to be a review lesson 2, where we are going to put what we've studied so far under the main topic, relationship between clauses, into perspective. We are going to study a passage, and in that passage we are analyzing the passage in relationship to what we have learned so far. It is not a new passage. In our previous review lesson 1, we have seen the passage. We try analyzing it against the question that was given. We will first of all read the passage together, after which we will begin to analyze the passage in relation to the question that will be given. We wouldn't be able to do that with you, everything. We won't be able to analyze the entire passage with you. But wherever we will end, it is expected of you to continue to analyze the passage against the question that will be given. So let's go into the lesson review, lesson 2. Mental reflection. This is a question that we are going to subject our passage to. The first question is, identify the various clauses in each sentence. We are identifying the various clauses in each sentence. And then 2, we are to identify A, if there is equivalency between the clauses. The clauses that we shall identify, are they of equal level? And we say a clause or clauses are on equal level when we have them to be independent clauses. 2 independent clauses. Of course, 2 dependent clauses also being together is also of equal level. But our discussion so far has been on 2 independent clauses linked together by a coordinator. And we have a series of coordinators that we studied. Those coming from the class of addition, some coming from the class of contrast, some coming from the class of result. We saw that. So when you have 2 independent clauses linked together by a coordinator, then we say this is of equal weighting. There's equivalency between the clauses. So that's what we're going to do. After identifying the clauses, are these clauses of equal weighting? B, if there is a clause subordinate to another. So if the clause is not of equal weighting, is there one subordinate to another? Is there a situation where one clause is given a higher rank than the other? So you have the main clause being of a higher rank and the subordinate clause being low. Meaning that the subordinate clause gets its complete meaning as a perfect unit under the main clause. So we are going to subject this passage. We are going to subject this passage to these 2 questions. First of all, we identify the clauses, and second, the clauses we shall identify, we find out whether they are of equal weighting. If they aren't of equal weighting, which one is subordinate to the other? Having said this, let's have the passage. We shall read the passage quickly and then move into analyzing it. Haven't you another interesting story, Fuseni? Grandfather Kanga asked in a hoarse whisper. If you have, tell it. Tell it quickly. At the urgent prompting of the councillors, Fuseni launched into another story. Many harvests after the young man of the sack of salt had become king in the country of The wise, in reward for his great wisdom, a calamity overtook his kingdom. The great tree under which the king held court was struck by lightning in broad daylight and burnt almost to ashes. The king and all his people went into mourning, strewing ashes on their heads and abstaining from shaka for many days. 5 moons after the council tree had been struck dead by lightning, the people woke up one morning to see a strange sight. The dead council tree was covered from its base to its utmost haired boughs with mushrooms, white and tasty mushrooms that were greatly valued as delicacy in the country of the wise. "Oh, my counselors," said the king, "what we once thought was a calamity was after all a blessing. We should show you that even the wisest men still have something new to learn before they die. Our council tree is dead, but if the tree had not died, how could we have all these delicious mushrooms now growing on it?" Straight away, the king commanded that the people should prepare for a great feast. The women were ordered to put great pots on the fire and to hold themselves ready to cook mushroom soup for the king and all his wise men. Then one wise man, who was acclaimed by all the people as one of the wisest men in the land because he nearly won a contest of the wise, then one wise man, who was acclaimed by all the people as one of the wisest men in the land because he nearly won a contest of the wise more than a generation back, came forward and posed this weighty question: "How, O king, shall we get all the mushrooms safely to the ground without damaging them?" Intriguing question, right? The king and all his wise men pondered this question for a long time. After scratching his head till the flesh turned blue, after scratching his head till the flesh turned almost raw, one wise man advised that the best climber in the kingdom be brought to climb the tree and pluck all the mushrooms, placing them gently in a sack slung at his back. But this advice was rejected on the grounds that if the climber should fall, all the mushrooms in the sack would be crushed. Another very wise man suggested plucking the precious mushroom with a long pole in the manner that children pluck fruits. This suggestion also found no favor, as the mushroom would get damaged in their fall to the ground. Then the king himself, who was king for the very reason that he was the wisest man in the land, held his hand up for silence and spoke to his subjects thus: "Men of the country of wise, wisdom is a strange thing and does not necessarily reside under the wisest head. The solution to our problem is simple. Let us cut down the tree at its base, bring forward all the strong men in the land, and let them stand ready to catch the bough of the tree as it falls. In this way, not a single mushroom will get damaged." Now, having finished reading the entire passage, let's now analyze the passage. Each paragraph under the passage against the questions we were given. And what were the questions? The questions expected us to identify the various clauses, and again, to find out whether the clauses we identify are of equal weighting. If they are not of equal weighting, which clause is subordinate to the other? That's what we shall be looking at. In our previous review lesson 1, we had analyzed 3 or 4 of the paragraphs. So we shall continue to analyze the rest of the paragraphs against the questions in this review lesson. We had looked at this paragraph. Haven't you another interesting story? We've looked at the entire paragraph in our review lesson 1. We've also looked at many harvests after the young man of the sack of salt had become king. The entire paragraph was also looked at in our review lesson 1. So we wouldn't analyze that. We shall continue from here. So first of all, identify the clauses and then ask ourselves, are these clauses of equal weighting in the sentence, or is one subordinate to other in the sentence? So let's first of all identify the sentences in this paragraph. 5 moons after the council tree had been struck dead by lightning, the people woke up one morning to see a strange sight. That's a sentence. It says a sentence because orthographically it begins with a capital and ends with a full stop. And again, it gives a complete sense. Now, the next sentence is, the dead council tree was covered from its base to its utmost boughs with mushrooms, white and tasty mushrooms, that were greatly valued as delicacy in the country of the wise. That's another sentence. So 2 sentences made up, coming together to give us that paragraph. 2 sentences coming to give us that paragraph. Now, what are the clauses in these sentences? Let's take the first sentence. Let's identify the clauses. Do we have more than one clause? If we do, are they of equal weighting? If not, which one is subordinate to the other? We can identify the clauses by 1, finding the subject-verb relationship in a string of expression. Then we say that's a clause. So we have 5 moons after the council tree had been struck dead by lightning. That is one clause there. Then we have another one. The people woke up one morning to see a strange thing. Another clause there. Now, what is the subject-verb relationship in our first clause? 5 moons after the council tree. So the council tree is the most important subject there. The council tree or tree. Which tree? The council tree. 5 moons after is telling us when the action we are going to identify happens. So the council tree is a subject. Had been struck dead. That is our verb there. It's a string of verb. Had been struck dead. All that is our verb clause. So we have the subject being the 3, or yes, the council tree. Had been struck dead being our verb group. It has been struck by lightning. That is not part of the verb at all. Now we have the people as another subject there. Woke, a verb, subject-verb relationship there. So the people woke up one morning to see a strange sight. So these 2 clauses, the people woke up one morning to see a strange sight, one clause. Then 5 moons after the council tree had been struck dead by lightning, another clause. So the whole of that clause is introducing another clause. That is why we have that entire clause separating the other one by a comma. So that clause, 5 moons after the council tree had been struck dead by lightning, is just introducing the main message. The people woke up one morning to see a strange sight. That's the most important aspect. So here, the people woke up one morning to see a strange sight. Is the most important statement there. 5 moons after the council tree had been struck dead by lightning. It's just a statement introducing. A clause introducing the main information. So we therefore see that 5 moons after the council tree had been struck dead by lightning, is not as important to the message as the people woke up one morning to see a strange sight. So we have the first clause that is introducing the main statement. The first clause, 5 moons after the cancer tree had been struck dead by lightning, being subordinate to the people woke up one morning to see a strange sight, which gives us a complete meaning. Therefore, the people woke up one morning to see a strange sight is a clause that gives a complete meaning. 5 moons after the cancer tree had been struck dead by lightning is subordinate to the clause, the people woke up one morning to see a strange sight. We do not have in this sentence the two clauses being of equal weight. Remember, we shall discuss the kind of clause we have in the first one, where a clause is used to introduce the other. When we get there, we shall discuss. We realize that we do not have a subordinator, as we learned in our previous lesson. Linking that clause, 5 moons after the cancer tree had been struck dead by lightning. We do not have a subordinator linking it to the people who woke up one morning to see a strange sight. There's a reason. We will get there as we discuss further, and that relationship between clauses. Now let's go to the next sentence. The dead cancer tree was covered from its base to its utmost shell boughs with mushrooms, white and tasty mushrooms that were greatly valued as delicacy in the country of the wise. That's a sentence, quite lengthy, right? That's a sentence, quite lengthy. Yes. How many clauses have you identified there? Or how many clauses can you identify there? I hope you are right. Now let's identify them. The dead cancer tree is a subject there. So the most important subject there is tree. The dead cancer tree, what tree? Dead cancer tree. You just qualifying the subject, the kind of tree. Now I was covered being our verb. So subject-verb relationship is there. Covered from where? From its base to its utmost shell boughs with mushrooms. So we have the first clause to be there. The dead cancer tree was covered from its base to its utmost shell boughs with mushrooms. It makes sense, right? But we have another clause. White and tasty mushrooms that were greatly valued as delicacy in the country of the wise. What mushrooms? White and tasty mushrooms. Please remember, don't be confused with our use of coordinates end and the use of end here. The use of end here is like listing things in series. Like we say coffee, ama, ajwa, and. Like we say tomatoes, orange, sweet potato, and. So the use of and there is not used as a coordinator at all. Good. So the next clause, white and tasty mushrooms. The subject there is mushrooms. What mushroom? White and tasty mushrooms that were greatly valued as delicacy in the country of the wise. Another clause. Now these two clauses, which of them makes sense? Which one doesn't make sense? So which one is then subordinate to the other? Or are they of all equal weighting? Of course not. We realize that white and tasty mushrooms that were greatly valued as delicacy in the country of the wise. Doesn't make sense. White and tasty mushrooms that were greatly valued as a delicacy in the country of the wise. You said this to someone, the person would, what I saying? That clause is only throwing light on the kind of mushrooms. One mushroom, this mushroom was tasty, was white and tasty. And there are the kinds of mushrooms that are greatly valued. In which country? The country of the wise. So the most important clause in that sentence is the dead cancer tree was covered from its base to its utmost shell boughs with mushrooms. Let's take note, shell boughs is just referring to the branches, the great branches, tall, big branches of a tree. So we have a cancer tree that was covered from the base to the utmost part of the branches with mushrooms. That's the message there. It makes sense. And then the dash linking us to the next clause is only throwing more light on the mushroom, and therefore doesn't make sense on its own. So the clause, the dead cancer tree was covered from its base to its utmost boughs with mushrooms, is a complete clause that gives us a perfect meaning, and therefore is an independent clause that is given a higher importance in the statement. With the statement, white and tasty mushrooms that were greatly valued as a delicacy in the country of the white, it's just adding more light on the kind of mushroom and doesn't also give a complete sense, and therefore is subordinate to the main clause. Of course, it's a different kind of clause. We realize that that kind of clause is not linked together with the independent clause with a subordinator. We do not see a subordinator linking the two. And we have clauses of such nature, which is similar to what we have seen, the discussion of which we shall get to as the lesson unfolds. Now let's go to the next paragraph. So here we have one clause being of a lower rank than the other one. "Oh, my counselors," said the king, "what we once thought was a calamity was after all a blessing. Which should show you that even the wisest men still have something new to learn before they die. Our cancer tree is dead, but if the tree had not died, how could we have all these delicious mushrooms now growing on it?" That's the paragraph. And let's identify the sentences or the clauses in the paragraph. "Oh, my counselors." That's a clause. Does it make sense? "Oh, my counselors." Yeah, it's a clause that is calling an attention. But the entire clause is, "Oh, my counselors," said the king. What did the king say? So, "Oh, my counselors," said the king, is introducing what the king actually said. So, "Oh, my counselors," that's the exclamation. "Oh, my counselors," they will turn and look at you. You are addressing them, right? Yes. You want them to give you your attention. So that is a way of addressing the people. And therefore, immediately you address someone by calling the person's name, the person expects something to follow. So that statement, "Oh, my counselors," said the king, doesn't give us any meaning. It's just like someone calls your name out and you turn to the person to find out what the person has to say. Imagine all of a sudden the person is silent. What do you get out of that? Nothing. Then we have what we once thought was a calamity was after all a blessing. It makes sense, right? Yes, it does. It's a clause. It makes sense. An independent clause. What we once thought was a calamity was after all a blessing. And what is that? Who should show you that even the wisest men still have something new to learn before they die? So we have, who should show you that even the wisest men still have something new to learn. So the wisest men still have something new to learn. Also makes sense. So here, the most important part is the wisest men still have something new to learn. Which also makes sense there. So a complete independent clause. But here we have before they die. Completing the entire statement. So now, analyzing the entire thing. we have one part of the statement beginning with a clause that is introducing the main thing. "Oh, my counselor," said the king. It doesn't make complete sense. And therefore, we get what the address of the king means in the next clause. What we once thought was a calamity was, after all, a blessing. That makes sense. Complete sense there. So that is giving important weighting. The most important message in that statement is what we once thought was a calamity was, after all, a blessing. Then we see that instead of we having a coordinator linking that independent clause, what we once thought was a calamity was, after all, a blessing. So we having a coordinator linking it to the next one, which should show you that even the wisest men still have something to learn before they die. So we having a coordinator, we have a punctuation mark, that's a semicolon. And at times, as we shall see furthermore in our studies, at times punctuation marks such as comma, semicolon, and colon are used to replace or are used to do the very function of coordinators. So here, a coordinator is taken off and a semicolon is brought in there, linking another independent clause to the first independent clause. So we have the two clauses of being of equal value. And the two clauses are what we once thought was a calamity, after all, was a blessing. And the other one, you should know that even the wisest men still have something new to learn before they die. Those two clauses of equal weighting. The speaker gives equal importance to the two, but we do not have the usual coordinator being there. Of course, you can take away the semicolon and put in an appropriate coordinator there. When you are doing that, which will also have to vanish. Try that. Then we have the last sentence in that paragraph. Our cancer tree is dead. But if the tree had not died, how could we have all these delicious mushrooms now growing on it? Another sentence. What are the clauses here? Our cancer tree is dead. That's one clause. Does it make sense? Yes, it does. The other clause. If the tree had not died, how could we have all these delicious mushrooms now growing on it? Remember, this is one lengthy clause, but when we look at it carefully, it's not just one clause that is there. We have a condition that is being introduced. If the tree had not died, it's a conditional clause that is introduced there. Then we have, how could we have all these delicious mushrooms now growing on it? Being an independent clause. How could we have all these mushrooms now growing on it? A question. But because we have a condition there, we have a dependent clause that begins with a condition. If. So if there is a dependent clause, that gets its complete meaning on the main clause. How could we have all these delicious mushrooms now growing on it? So that one, if the tree had not died, it's in lesser rank than how could we have all these delicious mushrooms now growing on it. But of course, that main clause has its fulfillment because the tree had died. So we have our independent clauses to be, our cancer tree is dead, and how could we have all these delicious mushrooms now growing on it? being of equal ranks, the tree is dead. And because the tree is dead, the result effect of the tree dying is that we have delicious mushroom growing on it. So the if clause, if the tree had not died, could vanish. And the sentence will be read like, our cancer tree is dead. Hence, we have all these delicious mushrooms now growing on it. But for the fact that we have an if clause introduced there to complete that aspect of the sentence, it's turned into a question. So we have our clauses given equal weighting there to be our cancer tree is dead, and how could we have all these delicious mushrooms now growing on it? These two clauses are given equal weighting. And then we have a clause that is subordinated to the two clauses, beginning with a condition if the tree had not died. This is where time will permit us to be with you. Analyze the rest of the passage, the paragraphs that are left on your own, hoping to meet you again in our next lesson on the same channel next week. Until we meet you again, we say bye-bye.